In this video, I'm going to tell you why the new Dellara P217 LMP2 car is possibly one of the best cars that iRacing has ever made. Welcome back to the Gamer Muscle YouTube channel. Click that like button and subscribe if you enjoy simulator content. So here you go. We have the car on the screen here in iRacing. The Dallara P217 LMP2 car. I'm in a practice session because I'll be driving whilst I'm talking about what I think of this vehicle. Now, if you drive this vehicle, it's currently being raced in the IMSA series, which is a mixed class 45-minute series where you've got these cars versus GT cars. It's absolutely mental, and in and of itself is actually a really fun event to do outside of the actual enjoyable driving characteristics of this vehicle. He's been too positive about iRacing. What drugs is he taking? Well, if they do something good, I will say something good. So let's jump into the car here. We've got practice. To put it bluntly, the reason why I'm enjoying this car is that, unlike many iRacing vehicles, this vehicle has a bit of play at the limit. Now, I'm not sure if it's because of the downforce, and this car's just got monster stick to it once you go over like 20 miles an hour, or if it's a fundamental design choice with how they've implemented it, or if it's just some new, different aspect to the tyre model. But the fact of the matter is, with this car, unlike other faster iRacing cars, you can overdrive it and actually recover it and play with it a bit without the car just auto-binning you. The only situation where this car seems to suffer from iRacing insta-death auto-bin is on braking when you trail brake and the tyres are cold. If you go over the rear tyres on braking, they lock up even a fraction of the time. Doesn't matter how quickly you come off it, how good you are with your steering. It's a 360 no scope off to the dead zone you go. It's also worth saying, I mean, this will come up in the comments straight away. People are like, oh, it's easy to drive because, or it's forgiving because it has crazy traction control on it. And indeed it does. It has two knobs. If you look to the bottom right, well, there's three knobs in this car. If you look at the right, you can see we've got the gain dial there. Even if we set the traction control on one there and the slip control, which is how you've got really good variable control of the traction control in this vehicle, even if you set them to the lowest settings, you still will find that this car is super pliable and really allows you to throw it into corners and really allows you to push and take risks and then maybe overdrive, make a bit of a mistake and then dial it back, which literally you don't have that in a lot of the vehicles, if any of the faster vehicles in iRacing. What seems to happen with most of the vehicles in iRacing is once you get to the limit, if you go over the limit at all, you either have this situation where the front tyres, they sort of spike, overheat or something, and they don't have any grip, and the rears as well. They don't have any grip that sort of doesn't come back for, it's like half a second. It's like a predefined time. You like slide, you catch the car, it's as if the car's still not being caught. It's mental. So you either have that where it just does that with the understeer and you can't bring it back, or you have it with the rear of the car. You get a tank slap and you recover it, but you have to still wait before you can get back on it. For whatever reason, with this car, you can get into a massive slide, and you know the grip's not going to be totally optimal as you into that next corner there, but it recovers as you would kind of expect it to, in that you have heated the tyres up, you have overdriven it, there might be a bit of residual heat in the tyres, a bit of residual grip loss, but if you're not, if you know what you're doing, you've got a good steering force feedback steering wheel and you know how to drive and recover a vehicle, you can recover it and it's not death, and it's not 100% passenger slide. You still have a little bit of degree of control with it. Now, what's really nice with this vehicle as well is that it's not, despite, as I say, it does have monster grip from the fact that it's just an upside-down aeroplane wedge. It does have monster grip, but it does have a nice little bit of slip to it as well. So when you're going into some of these corners at this track, Road Atlanta, which is actually probably in my top 5 tracks, bloody amazing racetrack, proper hills, proper corner, absolutely amazing track. you go through these corners and you do have a little bit of slide and slip there laterally, which is really nice to play with. And if you're doing the IMSA race series, where you're overtaking tons of GTE or GTE cars, you're overtaking them and there's a proper traffic jam. You have to take all these different lines into corners. You have to adjust your line, you have to modulate the brake, you have to take all these, you have to take your line totally different each time, and so you're having to adapt all the time. And this car allows you to do that and allows you to play with it a bit. Whereas if you were doing that with other cars in iRacing, it's like, oh, there's a car in front of me, I need to back off so I'm well under the limit so that I know if I have to take a different line, it's going to be safe. As opposed to, oh, there's a gap in front of me, I will try and charge my car through there and I will use my car handling skill to maintain balance of the vehicle. Even if it's not the optimal apex, I'll risk it for a biscuit, and most of the time, if you're skilled, you can get away with it, which is just really, really fun. Of all the fast vehicles in iRacing, this is the least annoyingly punishing with the time I've spent with it. The accidents and the crashes that have occurred with this vehicle are pretty much always my fault. I've done something wrong and the car said no. It's not been, oh, you forgot to remember you were playing iRacing's physics that operate like no other decent driving simulator or real-world vehicle. It felt like it was my fault, and I always feel that's ideal. Slide it in here a bit. Look at that, you're a monster. You can get on the throttle a bit there, can't steer it through there. We've got all the traction control on the minimum setting. I couldn't get on the gas there, it would rotate, but you've got a little bit of ply there. Now also what I noticed with this vehicle is when it comes to trail braking as well, after 3 laps, once you've gone past auto bin state of the locking up your wheels, you can really maximise time and position of the vehicle through the corners with trail braking. And again, with a lot of the other vehicles in iRacing, once you're turned into the corner and it's under load, I'd just be too worried to trail brake properly, because if you trail brake whilst turned too much, that's not how you do that. If you trail brake whilst turned too much, you just lose the rear and you can't even snap correct it. Obviously, in other sims and as you expect in real life, if you totally take the piss trail braking with too much load on the rear, you will just spin and lose it. But you know what I mean? Relative to everything else, iRacing is probably one of the most punishing simulators when it comes to trail braking into corners, and that going over the limit and it being a death sentence. So, yeah, I mean, what this car really reminds me of, and the first thing that came to mind was, if you play Assetto Corsa, the Maserati 12 MC12 MC12, it's like a GT1 car. This vehicle really reminds me of those dynamics, in that it's quite a planted car. It's got quite a sort of drawn-out trajectory in terms of how it wants to go through corners. It's not necessarily the most nippy of vehicles, but the grip loss is very progressive on it, which then makes it very forgiving to drive for the most part, and really satisfying in that it makes it obviously your fault when you make a mistake as opposed to the cars. Weirdly as well, it absolutely eats curbing in this. It really, you can absolutely smash the curbing, which is something I find in AC, obviously, prolonged curbing, if you put a wheel on it, often the cars sort of lose control quite easily. They just slide out. And in R-Factor 2, when you hit the curbing, the car's going crazy. This vehicle, for some reason, you can literally smash the curbing, and it seems perfectly fine. And I think maybe it's just the sheer downforce on the car maybe recovers the suspension or something. I don't know what's going on. Oh, I missed the brake point there. I don't know what's going on, but it's a really nice, forgiving vehicle. I need to get a fast lap without talking. The laps are slow when he's reviewing. Now, also, in terms of the actual cockpit details and the visuals, I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. you've got all the gubbins that you need on the steering wheel for all the information of the car. The cockpit's really nice and immersive. Engine sound is, you know, you're not talking Dirt Rally 2.0 engine sounds or ACC engine sounds, but you know, I think that's really nice and immersive. And the biggest aspects of the sounds with this that I think actually come through nicely are the sort of suspension compression, or if you put a wheel on the grass, and those kind of sort of sound, more the sound effect type situations. You know, I think that all sounds really nice, just adds to the immersion. It's not going to blow your earlobes off, but I think it sounds pretty decent. Let's follow this guy around so we can have a look at the external view. I have to say, LMP2 cars are absolutely gorgeous in reality. Some of my favourite looking race cars. They're really bizarre how they connect together if you ever get to see one in real life. The whole front just comes off, the whole back, they're all sort of like stuck together in different components, in different parts. Basically, Formula car with a roof on it, if you will. Look at how it sticks to the road through there. Just amazing. Now, in order to drive this and any car in iRacing, I will warn you guys, you do need iRFFB, which is a force feedback app which basically makes iRacing drivable. Without iRFFB, I can't play iRacing because the force feedback's garbage without it. And what iRFFB does is takes some of the telemetry from the game and gives you some force feedback based on the telemetry, specifically the seat of the pants setting it's got. So as the car's loaded up, you can feel that through the force feedback, which then informs you as a driver how much load you're putting on the car to know how much you can push, and if you're in a situation where you're asking too much from the tyres. Now, I will do a separate video on iRFFB, but until I do, if you Google iRFFB Alien Sim Racer, watch his video. He explains it really clearly, along with real-world driving examples, and also goes over some of the issues with iRacing's tyre model. So, yeah, iRFFB with this, and I have to say, from the force feedback perspective, with iRFFB, again, I can feel what the car's doing. Maybe I could do with a little bit more force feedback for the brakes locking up, so a bit more feel for that, but I've not found it to be a problem, especially on this track, doing, I don't know, like 3 or 4 IMSA races now. You know, you can feel, one of the things that iRacing always does well with its force feedback is the track, the road surface. Obviously, with it being a laser scanned road surface, you have all the little undulations and details and stuff, and that always comes through fantastic through the force feedback in iRacing. I guess you don't feel much of that vibration for understeer, so that's kind of lacking, which you get in other simulators. R-Factor 2 and ACC, for example, that doesn't seem to be particularly prominent in iRacing or there at all. But the key thing is, with iRFFB, from a perspective of what's important with force feedback, which for me isn't immersion, it's I need to know what the car's bloody doing because I'm in a simulator, I'm not in a real car. I need to feel what the load's on it, because in a real car you'll be using the G-forces to feel what the car's doing. In a sim rig that's not moving, you don't have that. iRFFB, seat of the pants setting, all the way up to 100, and jobs are good and happy times driving it. But yeah, I mean, in totality then, really, what I'm getting to, what I'm saying is, I just wish that more cars in iRacing drove like this. Not necessarily the same, you know, different vehicles handle different, but I mean in terms of the forgivingness of slip angles, even with it being a race car, and the ability to play with the car a little bit on the limit, low speed and high speed. And maybe, you know, if you're overdriving, the punishment is that the tyres wear down quicker. The punishment might be it's a little bit slower in some ways, but if you're absolutely balancing the car on the throttle and you're getting on it a little bit early with a little bit of counter steer, that's kind of ideal. That's with the correct setup, that is what you should be going for, in my opinion, approaching it the Schumacher method. That's what you want to be going for. You don't want to have to drive everything as if it was a front-wheel drive car. So if you do have iRacing and you're like, oh, what car shall I get next? This LMP2 car, just get this. Just get this. And if you're brand new and you're like, you want to waste money on iRacing because you like destroying your life with sim racing, what I would say is iRacing is very expensive. They do make out that, you know, you can get into iRacing. It's only £15. You can use their free content, which isn't free because you're subscribing. What I would say is, if you're brand new to iRacing, you really need to budget about £250 to £300 for the first year, £250 for the next year, and then like £150 each year onwards until you've got all the content that you drive. But basically, have in mind that iRacing costs about £270 for your first year, over the course of the first year. And then if you were getting into iRacing, I wouldn't get into this car straight away. I would go for something like the Skip Barber, which always has people racing it. It's a really fun car to drive. Road tyres, much better to start getting into iRacing with. But yeah, this is if you're an iRacer, this is a 100% totally must-have car. It'd be nice for them to do other series with it that maybe weren't even mixed. Just have 100 of these vehicles or 50 of these LMP2 cars all racing against each other. And maybe in shorter races. It wouldn't necessarily be realistic to LMP2 racing, but, you know, a good car's a good car. It's a bloody game. Let's just do fun racing. Not to say that the IMSA series isn't actually fun. It's actually really good, but, you know, it's nice to actually have a car that's really good in iRacing. I mean, look at this. This is with I'm using a setup with a full tank of fuel, and also this is a relatively competitive setup. See, this is what you should be able to do. Too much. But in general there, you see how much ply we have to the slip. I think we've lost part of the vehicle there, but look at this. In first gear, get on the brakes. You can actually, you know, you're not going to be doing this sort of stuff in a race normally, but say you brake really late and you need to get on the throttle early through some of these corners. You want to be in this situation where you are balancing the car out of a corner, and you might have to gun it like that. You know, you need to be able to have that margin of control for a race car to be realistic. Otherwise, it's like, what's the point? You know, you're just turning into, it's just Super Meat Boy Guitar Hero driving. Don't know if we can outright drift this. We've got all the traction control off, I think. You know, people are like, oh, well, you know, they see these, oh, I got on the brake after sliding out. So it's tricky. You know, you shouldn't be able to easily drift a car like this. But it should, you know, the amount that this gives you isn't, you know, to me, that's, the amount of forgivingness that it has is what I would generally expect. It's what you kind of lines up with what you see. You know, when you have a really talented driver, or, you know, a talented driver that makes a mistake, you see them, you know, if you're absolutely braking on the limit, you're going to see the cars going into corners with a bit of slip angle. You're going to see them powering out with a bit of slip angle. One last slide. It's got a really quick snap to it. I mean, the DD wheel obviously helps, but I'd imagine if you've got like a CSL Elite or even a T300 with iRFFB, it should give you enough information. You'll have to manually correct it. See, it's just, it does actually, this car does have quite a forgiving torque delivery on the throttle. But again, in real cars, you know, in the delivery of torque's not normally completely instant. It depends on the vehicle. But, you know, normally there's a bit of flex in the drivetrain, which stops the cars from lighting up, as they often do in certain simulators that don't seem to simulate all these things properly, and as a result are needlessly unforgiving. Difficult in areas where I don't think the real cars would be. But, yeah, I mean, I just bloody hope that more of the cars drive like this in iRacing. And I do wonder why iRFFB isn't integrated into iRacing. But as long as they don't get rid of it and it still works, who cares? It's there and it works. So that, guys, is that's the car, the Dallara LMP2 car. That's my video of it. Top notch, definitely worth getting. And of course, you've got the whole iRacing online system as well to race it with, which is something that's really lacking in other simulators. But thank you very much for watching this, guys. If you enjoyed it, make sure you click that like button. Make sure you subscribe and ding-a-ding-ding that bell. But until the next one, happy tea drinking and goodbye.